You've probably tried at least one: a gratitude journal, a meditation app, waking up 15 minutes earlier and calling it a routine. While millions of people cycle through these every January, neuroscience is quietly pointing somewhere else. The real brain rewiring doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in 8 behaviors so small, most people never think twice about them. The wellness industry is worth over $100 billion. It runs on the idea that happiness is something you acquire through enough practice, enough purchases, enough positivity. But the research tells a different story. What actually shifts at the neurological level isn't big. It's the accumulation of small behaviors that gradually change your brain's default state. Not how you feel in a good moment, how you feel the rest of the time. These are 8 of those behaviors. 1. Noticing without doing anything about it. People sometimes tell you that you seem detached, too observant, like you're watching more than participating. And they're not entirely wrong, you are watching more than most. But here's the distinction. Dr. Rick Hanson, neuroscientist and author of Hardwiring Happiness, found that deliberately savoring a positive experience, even for 12 seconds, begins to encode it into neural structure. The brain doesn't automatically retain positive information the way it does negative. You have to hold it long enough for it to land. Noticing without immediately reacting is how that works. Most people skip the noticing entirely and move straight to the next thing. You've been training a different reflex without knowing it had a name. 2. Naming what you feel. Other people assume you're cold because you don't escalate. You don't match their energy when things get heated. You stay level in rooms where most people are visibly unraveling. And they read that as indifference. They're not entirely wrong that stillness does create distance, especially in environments built around shared panic. But in 2007, Dr. Matthew Lieberman and his team at UCLA published research in psychological science, showing something they called affect labeling. When you name what you're feeling, even silently, even privately, your amygdala, the brain's threat response system, measurably quiets down. You're not suppressing, you're processing faster than the people who are still reacting. Someone I know learned the weight of this firsthand. He was in a meeting that had started to come apart. Raised voices blamed someone's numbers getting picked apart. He said 3 words to himself, not out loud, not to anyone in the room. Just internally, I feel frustrated. And his voice stayed level for the rest of that hour. Everyone in that room remembers who escalated. Nobody remembers him, but every one of them wants him in the next hard meeting. 3. Doing one thing without your phone. They call it old-fashioned, say you're inefficient. In a world built around constant context switching, your preference for finishing before you move on looks like you're not keeping up. And in fast-moving environments, that singularity can look like you're falling behind. But research on attention is consistent. The mere presence of a phone nearby, even face down, even silent, reduces available cognitive bandwidth by measurable margins. What you're building when you sit with one thing isn't a nostalgia habit. It's intentional cognitive architecture. Most people are training distraction. You're training capacity. 4. Sitting briefly with discomfort. You've been called too serious, too willing to stay in something hard when everyone else has already moved on. What looks like stubbornness from the outside is what psychologist Stephen Hayes, whose work on acceptance and commitment therapy has been replicated across hundreds of clinical studies, calls psychological flexibility, the ability to tolerate discomfort without immediately escaping it. Every time you sit in something difficult for a moment longer than you want to, you expand what researchers call your distress tolerance window. Your brain files the evidence it survived more than it thought it could. Over time, that changes what you're willing to take on. 5. Walking without deciding where. You don't have a productivity goal for it. You're not listening to anything. People around you optimize their commutes, and you're just walking. And from the outside, that looks unserious, like you're not maximizing. Psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan developed what they called attention restoration theory. The finding that unstructured time in low-demand environments, even brief walks without task requirements, restores your brain's capacity for directed attention. The prefrontal cortex recovers. The background noise quiets. You're not wasting time. You're maintaining the machine that makes everything else possible. But here's where I need you to slow down for a second. Is the version of happiness you're optimizing toward actually yours? Or is it borrowed? A version that looks right from the outside that other people would recognize, but that doesn't feel like much when you're inside it. Because some of these habits will only anchor you if the baseline they're building toward is where you actually want to be. That's worth sitting with before you optimize further. 6. Keeping a small promise to yourself. Nobody gives you credit for it. There's no external reward for following through when nobody's watching. And it looks indistinguishable from discipline, which people either admire from a distance or resent up close. But Albert Bandura's decades of research on self-efficacy, the belief that your actions actually produce outcomes, found something specific. Self-efficacy isn't built through motivation. It's built through evidence. Each small kept promise is a data point your brain files. Over time, you become someone your own nervous system trusts. That trust changes the quality of every decision you make. 7. Letting the day end. Most people bring the day to bed with them. They replay decisions, rewrite conversations, pre-litigate tomorrow. And from the outside, stopping that review can look like avoidance. Like you don't care enough to process. But neuroscientist Matthew Walker in Why We Sleep documented something precise. The brain processes emotional memories during REM sleep, and that sleep deprivation, even one night of it, specifically degrades next day emotional regulation. When you stop reviewing and let the day close, you're giving your brain the uninterrupted window it needs to do that work without you running interference. That's not avoidance. That's trust in a system smarter than the review loop. 8. One breath of actual presence. You make people feel like you're actually there. Not performing listening, actually there. Full attention, no visible impatience, not already composing your response. And in a world calibrated around distraction, that kind of presence is often read as intensity. Like you're evaluating. Like something's wrong. Research on social engagement shows that sustained presence, real eye contact sitting in silence, without rushing to fill it, activates the parasympathetic nervous system in the other person. Your calm becomes something they feel in their own body, not just observe in yours. Not because you're performing steadiness, because it's your actual default state. If you're a man, you've probably had your steadiness labeled wrong in meetings, in arguments in rooms where everyone else is performing urgency. That's not a flaw in your wiring. That's what a calibrated nervous system looks like in an environment trained to reward the loudest reaction. Follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity. Most people spend their whole lives chasing a feeling they've had once and want back. These habits build something different, not a peak, a floor. And once you've built the floor, the peaks matter less. Which of these 8 is the one you've been doing without realizing it had a name? Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who's been chasing the wrong version of happiness for too long, send this to them. Sometimes just hearing the science behind it changes something.